Okay, welcome back. Hope you're all having a great weekend and a great holiday. Today, we're continuing our review of our most recent RBT exam, where we're going through a set of questions and reviewing them together. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please subscribe. We really appreciate it. If you're looking for all of our study materials, please check out rbtexamreview.com. We offer 3 practice exams, a task list study guide, and our combo pack, which is our best deal. It now includes flashcards. Questions, comments, please let me know. I'd love to help. Other than that, work hard, study hard, and let's get to our questions. Question 1. Jane and some friends drive to the rivers to watch fireworks on the 4th of July. Fireworks show lasts 20 minutes. In total, 200 fireworks were used during the show. At what rate were fireworks used during the 20-minute show? First glance, kind of looks like a math question. It's just a rate question. And you need to know how to calculate rate. I say this all the time. Know how to calculate totals, averages, and rate. Okay, you might need to do it on the exam. Now, on the exam, you get scratch paper, you get a calculator, but for the most part, they're going to be very simple calculations. What is rate? What is our ratio for rate? How do we find it? Well, first, we need to know frequency, and then we need to know time, because rate is just frequency over time. So what is our frequency? Well, we know in total 200 fireworks were used during the show. So our frequency would be 200. And what is our time? Well, it was a 20-minute show, so that's our time. So what we're going to do is put frequency divided by time, and that is going to give us 10. So our frequency is going to be what? 10 fireworks per minute. Not 20 fireworks per minute, because that's not what the calculation totals out to. 200 fireworks is just our frequency. Our correct answer is 10 fireworks per minute. 200 fireworks per minute just doesn't make sense because it's a 20-minute show and we launched 200 fireworks in total. So at what rate were fireworks used during the 20-minute show? C, 10 fireworks per minute. A mom is sitting on the couch while her son plays on his iPad next to her. The mom gets up to get a drink of water and the son starts singing the alphabet. He stops when the mom sits back down and smiles at him. The scenario happens each time the mom leaves the couch. What would you hypothesize is the function of the son's behavior? Functions. What are our 4 functions? Tangible, attention, escape, and automatic reinforcement. When they ask you to hypothesize a function, we need to look at the whole scenario in the big picture. What's the antecedents? What are the consequences? Whose behavior are we looking at? In this case, we're looking at the son's behavior. So what do we know? We know the son is playing on the iPad. When the mom gets up and gets a drink of water, the son starts to sing. But then the son, when the mom sits back down and smiles at him, stops. And this happens each time the mom leaves the couch. So if the mom is going away, the son is starting to sing. And as soon as the mom acknowledges the son, he stops. What are we thinking is the function? Would it be obtain a tangible? Well, it doesn't seem like the son is obtaining any sort of item or stimuli for this. He's already playing on the iPad. Doesn't seem like he's obtaining anything. However, he is obtaining attention because the mom is smiling at him. She's acknowledging him every time he starts to sing. When she acknowledges him, he stops singing. He's not escaping anything. He's not getting away from the couch. He's not getting away from the mom's presence. He is looking to gain attention. And then it's not automatic reinforcement. Remember, automatic means alone. We have a second person in the scenario providing the consequence, which is smiling at him. So it's not automatic. The most likely function of the son's behavior is going to be to obtain attention. During session, your client engages in a new behavior that you have not seen before. You ask the parents if that behavior occurs often. Asking the parents is a type of blank assessment. We have 4 major assessments you need to know. You need to know indirect, direct, functional analysis, and our preference assessments. Now, we know preference assessments, we're actually presenting stimuli back and forth. And yes, you could ask the parent what type of stimuli the client likes, but it would be the same type of assessment as this. We prefer to do preference assessments directly, actually working with the client. Therefore, what is a direct assessment? A direct assessment is when you're actually observing with the client, you're working with the client, you're watching the client behave. If you were just asking the parents questions and not actually observing the client performing a behavior, performing a skill, probing any of that, what are you doing? Well, you're conducting an indirect assessment. Indirect assessments are things like surveys and interviews and checklists, where we are verbally asking or sending out a checklist or taking a response survey, but we're not actually observing the behavior or the client engaging in that behavior. A reinforcer assessment occurs after a preference assessment. When we know what the client prefers, we can then start to see how those preferences change the client's behavior and therefore start to find reinforcers. But we're not doing that here. All we're doing is questioning the parents. Hey, does this behavior occur often? And through our interview, we are conducting an indirect assessment. A prompt functions as, okay, very easy question. This is a kind of a fluency test. Okay, what do we know? We know prompts or antecedents. They evoke a behavior we want to see. They follow the SD, but come before the response. Okay, so a prompt functions as what? Does it function as a cue? Of course, it's a cue or a signal for a desired behavior to occur. We're trying to evoke behaviors that we can't evoke without prompts. The prompt is just an extra push for the behavior we want to see. What about a temporary SD? Is a prompt a temporary SD? It is, okay? And that's why we fade prompts, because we want the behavior to be evoked by the real SD. When we're using prompts, it comes after the real SD and starts to function as that temporary SD. We don't want that. But for the time being, it's good because now we can start to reinforce that behavior occurring due to the prompt. So a prompt functions as a cue. It functions as a temporary SD. Does a prompt function as a potential reinforcer? Well, no, because is a prompt an antecedent or a consequence? Well, prompt is an antecedent and a reinforcer is a consequence. So a prompt can't function as a potential reinforcer. A prompt does function as a cue. It functions as a temporary SD. So a prompt functions as both A and B. John has promised that he will receive a big prize if he completes his homework without leaving his seat. John finishes his homework and receives $10. Next time John does his homework, he stays in his seat the entire time and receives $8. Reducing the amount of dollars John earns is a type of what? What is the question asking about? The question is asking about the intervention where John is earning these dollars. Now, what do we know about the dollars and their effect on John's behavior? Well, we know at first, John was told, if you do your homework without leaving your seat, then you get $10. And he successfully did that. Next time John did his homework, he stayed in his seat the entire time. So we added this dollar or this money with positive. It increased John's behavior. It's reinforcement. So we know some sort of reinforcement. Next time, however, he only received $8. So the amount of reinforcement given is being reduced. And reducing the amount of dollars John earns, or the amount of reinforcement, is called what? Is this shaping? Well, it's not shaping, because shaping, we are trying to reinforce approximations or parts of behavior to reach a terminal behavior. John has already successfully engaged in the behavior we want to see, so we're not shaping anymore. It's not prompting. Prompting, remember, is an antecedent. This is a consequence intervention. It's a reinforcement. It's fading, right? We're fading out the reinforcement because we don't, for the rest of John's life, want him to receive a full $10 just for staying in his seat when completing a task. So now that he's capable of doing it, we start to fade out our reinforcement, try to strengthen that behavior, and start working on maintaining that behavior. FCT is functional communication training. We're not teaching communication here. We are using a consequence strategy of positive reinforcement to try to increase John's behavior and now try to strengthen and maintain by fading out the amount of reinforcement John is receiving for engaging in the target behavior. Reducing the amount of dollars John earns is a type of fading. Mr. Griffin runs a toy factory with 50 employees. Every hour, he walks through production to observe who is and isn't engaged in their assigned duty. He then records it on the clipboard. Mr. Griffin is using what measurement? Kind of a hard question. As we can see, we are using discontinuous measurement here. And even if you didn't know we're using discontinuous measurement, the way you can kind of get to that point is understanding that when we have 50 employees or 50 clients or 50 kids or a group of a lot of people that we have to measure, continuous measurement becomes very difficult. So likely we're going to use some sort of discontinuous. Additionally, Mr. Griffin is only measuring every hour, meaning if his interval is an hour, only at the end of that hour does he measure behavior. So we know it's some sort of discontinuous measurement. Now, what is he doing to measure? Well, he is walking through production at the end of our interval, observing who is and isn't engaged in their assigned duty. Is this permanent product? Well, no, we're not measuring what his employees are producing. We're measuring, are they engaged in their assigned duty? Is it whole interval? Well, with whole interval, Mr. Griffin would need to observe his employees that full hour. He's not doing that. He's just going every hour at the end of the interval to observe. Okay, so that sounds to me like momentary time sampling. However, when we are doing momentary time sampling on multiple people at once, we also call that a play check or a planned activity check. Who is and isn't engaged in their duty? That's what Mr. Griffin is doing. And it can't be partial interval for the same reason it can't be whole interval, because with partial interval, you need to observe the entire interval at least until they respond or engage in the behavior. He's not doing that. Again, he's doing only at the end of every interval. He's using a play check or a planned activity check. A planned activity check is just a type of momentary time sampling where we are looking to see if members of our group are engaged in the response or the instruction, or in this case, the duty. When his class returned from summer break, Mr. Johnson gave a pop quiz on the first day of class and said, "All right, let's see what you forgot over the summer." Mr. Johnson is testing for what? Now, we're looking at Mr. Johnson and his pop quiz and the strategy behind his pop quiz. And the key is, what does Mr. Johnson say? Well, he says, let's see what you forgot over the summer. So if we want to test to see if skills have persisted or skills still exist after teaching has stopped, what do we call that? Is Mr. Johnson testing for generality? Well, not necessarily, right? He wants to see what they forgot, not what they can bring over, okay? And yes, maintenance is technically part of generalization, but Mr. Johnson isn't too worried about the generalization right now. He's more worried about the maintenance. If we're looking to see what have you forgot or what skills have you stopped engaging in once teaching stops, and if they've just got back from summer break while teaching was stopped for summer, we're testing for maintenance. He's not testing for avoidance. Okay, there's no functional analysis going on here. And he's not testing for preference. This is not any sort of preference assessment. He wants to know, have any of your skills maintained? And if so, what set of skills or what have you learned in the previous class? What's maintained over to my class? Which of the following would be considered an antecedent intervention? Non-contingent reinforcement, positive reinforcement, corrective feedback, or negative punishment. Antecedent intervention comes before the response. It's proactive and it's preventative. Positive reinforcement comes when? Well, comes after the response. So it has to be a consequence. It's reactive. Corrective feedback comes when? After the response. We're correcting the response. Consequence intervention, reactive. Negative punishment comes after the response. Consequence, reactive. So the only answer that we can possibly pick is non-contingent reinforcement. And the reason non-contingent reinforcement is an antecedent intervention is because it isn't contingent on anything. Okay, it's not contingent on behavior. It's not reactive. It's proactive because we have a schedule and we're delivering reinforcement regardless of what the client is doing or what behavior the client is exhibiting. Non-contingent reinforcement attempts to manipulate motivating operations through reinforcement. So non-contingent reinforcement is considered an antecedent intervention. It comes before the response occurs. And then finally, if you're asked to graph data by your BCBA or supervisor, you will most likely use what kind of graph? Okay, what's the most common type of graph in ABA? It's It's going to be a line graph. As an RBT, you'll probably never use a bar graph or a pie chart. You might see a scatter plot every now and then, which looks to draw some sort of correlation, usually between times and behaviors. But as an RBT, you most likely won't use that. If you use a graph at all as an RBT, you'll probably use a line graph. It's the most common graph in ABA, and it's probably the one you'll use as an RBT. Okay, please enjoy your July 4th holiday. Check out rbtexamreview.com. Subscribe to our channel. Questions, comments, let me know. Other than that, let's work hard, study hard. I'll see you soon.